Hi, everybody. Welcome to Talkin Shyt. I'm Constantine, and this is Martin. Or Mark can introduce himself.
I could introduce myself. Yes, I could say I'm Martin and you're Constantine.
That's right.
That's all right.
Today we're talking about the riots in France. That's if you can even. As Martin saying, you
The,
can call France a
the
country.
revolution. Is there a France left? Yes. Do we still call it France? Do we just call it a burnt remains of free land, free real estate? Are we that bad yet? Has the entire country burnt down? I mean, how bad is it? What have you heard?
Okay, well, I forget when it started, but I think it's been the last week or two that I heard that there's been riots happening in France, a new set of riots. Now, I think France has been rioting sort of consistently up until last maybe a couple of months ago.
Well,
Uh, that was about
they had
the pensions, but I think it was about more than just the pensions. But anyway,
yeah, they've had the pension riots and they had what was the Yellow Jackets?
uh, I didn't know there were yellow jackets.
Yellow Jackets. There was a thing called the Yellow Vest protest. Was that? Yeah, that was about 2018. Yeah, which was about, is that a political farming something or another that happened? Don't know.
The Yellow Vests
Disproportionate
movement, the Yellow Vests protests or Yellow Jacket protests are a series of populist grassroots weekly protests in France that began on November 17th, 2018. Actually, it's funny that they chose November 17th because there's actually a terrorist organization in Greece called November 17th. So I actually wonder if that date wasn't picked on purpose. But anyway,
were deliberate or just an accident.
yeah.
Yeah. So France has been going off. France has a history of going off, and they've been going off for a while. And now I know last week when we were talking about it, we were talking about the coup in the slash non-coup in Russia. That yeah, it was sort of happening, and now this week it seems to have gotten worse, and then maybe a little bit better. Don't know what the latest is. I know they were saying there are some places I've been reading where France has fallen. They're doing the very dramatic. Others, I'm sure CNN are calling it a fiery but mostly peaceful protest,
Yeah.
as they tend to do.
Yeah, well, the left
What's
is going to tell you that they're peaceful and that they'll probably spin it and say, "Oh, it's just a bunch of like white bigots or European bigots that want to kick out, poor immigrants." So, and then the right will probably, I don't know, spin it differently. But what I'm hearing is basically there was some immigrant kid or something, young teen that was, I don't know, killed by the cops, and that sort of instigated a whole bunch of rioting. And that's really what it is, but I'm not completely sold on it because it seems to me France has been rioting a lot recently, and I think it's more than just that.
Yeah, no, I did want to say something about that.
Yeah, go ahead.
And that's something where I see parallels in with this to San Francisco and New Orleans and the shit that's going on in America, where so the kid that got shot. So just to rehash that, right? I think it was a 16 or 17-year-old. Pretty sure he was an immigrant, Nahum, something like that, who was pulled over by police. He was in I think, borrowed Mercedes is the term they're using. I'm assuming stolen. The license plates were wrong. They'd swapped out with another vehicle. He was
Stolen.
known to police. He had a
Yeah.
history of police interactivity around, I think, stolen vehicles and things like that. Um, it sounds like he was issued instructions by the police. He refused, he did the usual, I'm going to throw, rather than, sir, yes, sir, I'm going to throw a fit, and push back on the police. At
Yeah.
some point, police officers pulled out the gun. He started the car and he's been shot, killed. And the point I wanted to make was that I see a lot of parallels between that and New Orleans and no, it's not New Orleans. I'm thinking Portland,
Yeah.
sorry, Oregon,
Seattle.
and San Francisco and the shit that's going on in California. And I actually see a lot of parallels with, about the stuff that's been happening in Alice Springs in Australia.
No, what's going on there? That's
So
interesting.
Alice Springs has got a lot of crime at the moment. So Alice Springs, a small little town, well, 25 population of 25,000 people, in the
Actually,
middle of
come to think
Australia.
of it, Alice Springs, I've always heard has had sort of like has had a lot of criminal activity.
They this is going back. Let me just do a brief synopsis here. There was a thing called the federal intervention that happened in Australia in remote Indigenous communities that banned alcohol in a lot of remote communities, including Alice Springs. That ended this year, those alcohol bans. Alcohol was effectively allowed in Alice Springs. So Aboriginal communities. Some of the Aboriginals were getting a bit too drunk. They're saying those problems are caused by drinking. The end result is Alice Springs has had massive break-ins, cars being stolen, set on fire, that sort of thing. And the big one they're finding is they've actually got gangs of kids, like 12-year-olds, running around the streets with a machete. We actually had a guy from where I am, the community I'm in, who went down to Alice Springs. I shook his hand and I wished him luck when he left. He ended up waking up in hospital because he got bashed, coming back from a pub at night. That was how bad that's how bad shit's been getting. Excuse me. And what I see, so going back to this kid in France, what I see is a kid who he's had a history of criminal behavior, right? He's never been pulled up on it. I'm sure they had a behavior management plan. I'm sure he was pulled into a room and said, you're a very naughty boy and you need to stop doing this. And he said, oh, yes, sir, I'll be a good boy now. I promise I'll do it. And he walked out and went back to it. He's never been like scared the shit out of it. Hey, if you do this again, we're going to fuck you up. We're seriously going to mess you up. It's not acceptable in our society. We're not going to deal with it. And because we've sort of embraced this soft approach to child behavior, like the days of the cane, where you used to get the shit whipped out of you at school by the teacher because you spoke out of turn, are gone. And we've now got kids in America. So kids in America roundhouse kicking teachers in the face. Because the teacher took their phone because they were on their phone all the time, and the kid doesn't understand, and they're like, "We'll give him my phone back." Teacher doesn't. Roundhouse
Look,
kick.
in defense of the kid, I'll say the way the education system is set up in the United States and has been the last, few decades. I mean, you'd be bored shitless in class anyway, so I can sympathize. But
I think there are issues with the education system everywhere, actually. But I actually see a lot of parallels where what's happening is kids are basically not being disciplined. That the end result is they are then having encounters with law enforcement, like George Floyd, these sort of people. They're going through life where they're doing the wrong thing. They're having more and more encounters with law enforcement. Eventually, it gets to the point where those encounters, where the police are, hey, I need you to roll down your window. No, I'm not going to roll down. It becomes a back and forth. The situation escalates. Eventually, police officers are pulling out their guns, and this is where we end up. So, and the point I wanted to make there was, I think, it's the parallels that I see between what's happening in France, what's happening in New Orleans. I keep going back to New Orleans. I don't know why I keep saying New Orleans, but what's happening in America, in Oregon, in Portland, in San Francisco, in New York City, and you see like Rudy Giuliani back in the day, where he came out and the thing he implemented was I think that was zero tolerance. I'm not sure what they called it, but something or another policing where
he was a hardliner on crime, and that's why New York got cleaned up in the 80s and 90s.
Yeah, and it was any little crime. It was if you broke a window, they threw the book at you type thing. Like they had like every little crime, because they knew that you start off doing the little crimes, and then once you get, okay, I can get away with this, I'm going to keep doing that. You move on to the bigger crimes, and then that's when they were causing problems. So by clamping down on the small crimes, Rudy Giuliani cleaned up New York City. The place has been voting Democrat since, and now it's gone to shit because Democrats don't, believe in discipline.
They're bleeding hearts is the problem. They're bleeding hearts. They're, they think, we have to be soft and, people, they're just unfortunate people who, you know what it is. A lot of leftists are born into privilege. And so they think, oh, well, if we just are nice to people who haven't had the privilege, then they'll change, but they fucking don't,
I think the mistake, and I say this because I've seen it a lot in the particular organization of which I am a member of, where very intellectual people, and there was a story I was actually reading about a college professor. I think he was American. I wonder if I can remember this story right. Apparently a college professor who was teaching something about human behavior interaction, and he was totally being conned by some Nigerian prince scam at the same time, and everybody who knew was like, yes, that's him. The point is, he was like teaching against these things about how to identify these things. And the thing I've seen in very intelligent people is, there's street smart and there's book smart. I think street smart people know, like someone like Donald Trump, I would say, is street smart. He's very savvy. He's not an idiot. He's kind of an idiot, but he's not an idiot, where he understands how people work. He knows that if there's a cookie on the table and the kid wants a cookie, and then the cookie's gone, and you ask the kid, did you take the cookie? The kid's going to say, no, I didn't. But Trump wouldn't tolerate that. I'm just making up an example here, basically. It's
Yeah.
somebody who wouldn't tolerate that, who would be like, see through the bullshit. Whereas really intellectually intelligent people are like, oh, well, the kid says he didn't do it, and I don't want to falsely blame him, and I don't really have any evidence, so therefore I'm not going to punish him. Like that, they're really intelligent people sort of autistically miss basic human shit. It's like the notion that somebody could be lying to them or telling them, just outright telling them porkies is kind of like beyond their thinking. They don't. Why would anybody do that? They're so. I almost think it's a mental illness in some respects.
Yeah, I
This
think
sort of
so.
high intellect, completely in a bubble, and that's what I think is because you were sort of saying about elites. Were you saying about elites, or were you saying about elites once before?
Oh, we just
But
you mentioned that in the first one, but anyway.
yeah, you sort of get elites who
They grew up in
are
a bubble.
in a bubble. They're completely out of touch. So it's the case we're seeing in America, where CNN, the building is literally burning down behind him, and he's saying it's a fiery but mostly peaceful protest. And you're like, how can you be that stupid? Because you're in your little
How
bubble.
can you say a fiery but peaceful protest? It's either peaceful or it's fiery.
Yeah,
I
if
mean,
you've
it's
got
like
burning
saying
buildings,
there's
it's
a
not peaceful. Yeah, yeah. And this is the thing where I think we've had this situation where I think our society as a whole has become a lot softer. So we've had that the slippery slope is not a fallacy; it's a fact of
no,
life.
it
We've
is.
become softer and softer and softer, and it's gotten to the point now. Kids know it, and I'm in a community where they actually do beat the kids. Like if the kids fuck up, the kids get a belting, and having that smug little smile of, oh, I've gotten away with something, completely wiped off their face when it's like, no, you haven't. You're about to get the shit kicked out of you. And then, oh, fuck. And it's like, yeah, and if you do that again, it gets worse. I mean, there are stories, like, so the community I'm in, there are stories of back in the day, this is going back 20 years ago, where one of the rangers came into town, or 20, 30 years ago, maybe, where one of the rangers came into town and he was told, oh, you might need to go out to the garbage dump. I was like, why? Oh, there's someone out there who needs a bit of help. Goes out there, finds this kid with bones broke, like legs broken, bones sticking out, like
Jeez.
severity that bad, in a bad way. Like if I didn't get him in the car and take him to the clinic, he would have
Yeah.
been goner. Bundles up and takes it. And yeah, because the kid fucked around and he found out. And the thing is, we had a society where that used to happen. Like you talk to, yeah, your parents, my parents' generation, and
Yep.
grandparents.
Yep.
If you spoke out of turn at school, you had the shit kicked out of you.
Accountability.
If you wrote with your left hand, you got whipped, you got caned, sort of thing. And then we went into the 70s and 80s where we sort of made the mistake of thinking, well, most kids, we don't really need to beat them anymore, so we can remove all those horrible punishments. And now we'll have a behavior management plan, and we'll sit down and we'll have a conversation with the kid. And they don't realize that the kid's sitting there. A 12-year-old knows what to say. The first thing you work out as a human being is you can walk into any room and you know the things you can say to keep everybody happy. Black Lives Matter, Pride Month. You say those things in the right circles in America. You can walk through there and anything. You say anything else, all of a sudden everybody turns on you. So people learn as social creatures, oh, I need to say these things to do what I want to do. And if you get to a point, and I think we're at a point in society where there's a disconnect reality and what people are saying. So, for example, Donald Trump is really corrupt and terrible, and yet the Mueller investigation, that he's a Russian agent, was all bullshit.
Yep.
All that sort of stuff was bullshit. Meanwhile, the Bidens they found cocaine in the White House this week. They've got an audio recording of Hunter Biden saying, I've got the big man with me right next to me. You make sure fucking $5 million in the bank account, or I'm going to make sure it's not happening. You've got clear evidence of the most corrupt administration in what's going to be America's history, and crickets, because, but they say they're nice people. It's like this elitist sort of bubble that's completely out of touch with reality. So yeah, and that's why I do think, I suppose, bringing it back to France, where that's gone on for so long, that this is what you've ended up with. And you either clamp down, and like, this is how you get, like, if you want an authoritarian government, this is how you get an authoritarian government. This is how you get a really hard right wing I'm going to come in, I'm going to shut this down. We are going to have boots on the ground. They're going to have batons. They are going to swing their batons. They're going to crack skulls. And if they end up in, if they crack enough skulls, eventually people will get the message. Like, and that's where, depending on the reaction of France, where they've got so many migrants, and I do think that's part of it. And this is where I think the migrants is a big part of a big issue, that they know they've come from a culture where, yeah, you do get the shit kicked out of you, to a culture where you can do whatever the fuck you want and no one touches you.
I think
Where
the
you've
problem
now,
is, I do hear people saying the problem is a lot of the second generation migrants. And this is, I've heard this a lot, the concept of second generation migrants.
yeah,
They're like they're the most troubled because they're born into a culture from a foreign land. So they're kind of stuck because I've sort of experienced this myself because, being like technically being an immigrant to Australia coming from the
yeah,
US, it's
being
like you don't really fit
being
in anywhere. It's like you're not
illegal alien, yeah,
like you're like originally you're from like Africa or the Middle East, but so that's where you come from, and you grow up in a culture around your parents who come from there. But then also you live in a country that has different values, so you're kind of stuck between, am I French or am I Arab or
and so
African,
you
or
still
and so there's like
have
they have a. My point being, second generation people sometimes have identity issues, and I think
there
maybe
is
that
a
partly causes because they don't fit in either with their own or with the people in the country that they're living with. So they're, you know,
Yeah, I agree with that. So, like you've still got your American accent, even though how old were you when you came out? Like 4 or 5 years old or something?
six. Yeah, about
Yeah, yeah,
six.
six. So
Yeah,
you still got your American. So you obviously, oh, you're an American.
yeah,
Well,
exactly.
kind of, yeah, but you've been here for 20, 30 years,
Yeah,
Um, there is a wonderful, I wish I could remember the name of it. There is a wonderful, one of the previous communities I was at got some grant funding for some guys to do some filming. This is remote Aboriginal communities in Australia. And he did a wonderful little short film about this Aboriginal kid who goes to school, who goes off to university basically in the city. So he's got his courses and he goes off to do his study and he's doing that. And then he comes back. But there's some bullshit going on in community that he's sort of a bit involved in because he's sort of culturally related to some of the bullshit that's going on. Anyway, the short film gets to this point where he's he has a 2 week break before he has to go back to college go back to university to sort of do his final exams and finish that off and get his certificate. The whole purpose of what he was been going into town, his
yeah,
education, prove himself, have that bit of paper, the whole reason he's been sacrificing this year and going away and doing that. But he comes back to community for those last 2 weeks to catch up with family, and someone's died in his family. I think someone's died. I can't remember the exact details of the story, but basically something has happened.
yeah.
And because he's the right cultural relationship, he has responsibilities as part of a ceremony, and he needs to be there for the ceremony. And it ends. It doesn't resolve it. It just ends in this one. And it's really good because it just ends in this way because it leaves him with this conundrum where the whole film has been about these two worlds, where he goes out to community and he's doing community stuff, sort of cultural way. And then he's going into the big smoke in the city and he's doing sort of stuff there in sort of what we would consider, our normal culture. And then it ends with he's kind of got to make this choice. He's caught between two worlds. I mean, if he doesn't go back and do his, exams, he's going to fail. But if he stays here and does that, or if he stays here and does his ceremony, but if he does go back, then he's going to the community will basically ostracize him and say, we're going to kick you out because you've done the wrong thing. So,
Yeah.
I think that second generation, yes, and I think that's a problem for any situation where you have a clash of cultures. Where one of the things I've been reading about and seeing in France was where you have these people who have come to France and they want to get to the UK. They don't give a shit about France. They're just stopping there on the way to the UK. Or they're speaking French saying, fuck France. I hate France. France is a shitty country.
Because a lot of them come from North Africa. Some of them come from North Africa where
Algiers.
France, huh?
Algiers.
Yeah,
Algeria?
Algeria, Morocco,
Yeah.
Tunisia, and those were like ex French colonies, some of them, or particularly Algeria was, and so they've grown up
Al-
this idea that the French are colonialists. Dude, there's so much wrapped up with white guilt, white hatred, colonial hatred, European anti-Europeanism. Thanks to leftists who are anti-Europeans because they're guilty, they have guilty consciences for that stuff. And so
There's a lot to be said about
they
that.
come to France thinking that, oh, you owe us, and so they think they have carte blanche to treat have no respect for French laws or French customs. you know. So that's why you see some of this crime and all that. Not to mention that they're fucking broke ass, and so it's like, well, criminality is the only way they can get anywhere.
Socioeconomic factors, yes.
Yeah,
It's
there's that as
I
well.
think
It's dude, it's like it's a cocktail of different, so many different things.
it is a confluence of events where, yes, socioeconomic factors do come into it, but by the same
Yeah,
token,
absolutely.
you know, if you've got a kid who's poor, um, you know, that doesn't give him a fucking right to take shit from somebody else. You know, if
Oh
you've got a
yeah,
kid
yeah.
who was
I'm
beaten
not
by his
saying.
dad, that
Yeah,
doesn't give him a right to go do other stuff. But you know, but this is the
yeah,
thing: you've got that socioeconomic impact, you've got those cultural factors, you've got that, you know, I don't fit in.
but
You
I
know,
mean,
where do am
yeah,
I French? Am I
yeah. But this,
Algerian?
this is my point. The
What
fact
is
that
it?
the fact
So
that they're immigrants, they're
unrest.
children of immigrants. They don't fit in because they're not French. It maybe makes it difficult for them to get jobs because maybe they don't know the language, they're not educated well enough, and so it's like, well, they turn to crime because they don't really have any options in terms of
Well, don't really understand the cultural understanding of a job, because I find the same thing in the remote communities I work in,
there's
where I
that
get
too.
plenty
Yeah,
of guys who want a job, but they can't read and write English to a sufficient enough level to like even fill in timesheets in some cases. You know, I've had it actually one really good one. I'll do this. Hang on. Let's see if this works. Oh, my writing is terrible. What's that? Hang on. You can.
that
I'll use a
20,080.
blank piece of paper rather than one that's got my other notes from the back of it. Right. What's that?
That's 20,080. The number
No,
20,080.
it's 280.
Oh, okay, yeah.
So we had a situation where, yeah, again, you're dealing with people who speak English, literate, numerate. Hang on a minute. What's this number you've entered into an Excel
At
spreadsheet?
least they gave you a half decent answer. Someone else could have just been like,
Well, this is the thing, but this is the thing again. It's like, I don't know enough. Like, know the numbers, can make good change, but how do you write that down? And how do I do that into an Excel? And of course, you put the wrong number in an Excel spreadsheet and it shits itself. You know, when we're talking about this particular example is the store we have in community,
yeah.
where this story sort of comes from. Where, you know, yeah, it's like, hang on a minute, that's how there's no, that shouldn't be 20,000. Why is, oh yeah, no, hang on, this is how it's happened. But you know, those little things where, and you see it, like, for example, someone who might earnestly want a job but sees, like I'm very cautious with how I train in remote communities, because I know I'm highly competent and capable, and even for a white person, I know white people are fucking useless. But you know, I can do stuff in 20 minutes that other people take
Yeah.
hours to get done.
Incompetence is
Um,
universally
yes,
is universal, you know.
yes.
So
But when you show someone that you can do something in 20 minutes and boom, 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 here it is, and it's perfect, and it takes them, they don't even understand what you've done, and it takes them 5 hours to do half of what you've just done, they kind of go, okay, I don't know how to do this. I'm very dumb. I'm going to shy away. So getting that, no, 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 look, it's just going to take you time. You are never going to get to the level I am, because that's, you know, 20 years and a different, you know, 20 years of
yeah,
education and a culture before it and
some
all
of it
that
is
sort of
inherent
stuff.
lack of confidence or inherent
Yeah,
or natural sort
yeah,
of, like, you know. I mean, when you
yeah.
look at, like, you know, I used to like see, when I was a musician, I would see guitarists you could shred like, you played 100 notes a minute, you know, you sort of feel like, oh fuck, you know, I'll never get to that point. And you know, some people don't, because, and I accepted the fact that I just didn't have the talent for it, and that was okay. But I mean, I can sort of see why some
Or
people would be
you
inherently
go,
like, oh, like,
it's
how
going
can
to take me hours to learn
uh,
how to do. It's going to be days, weeks,
like, you might
years, and
want to, but you sort of feel
yeah,
like it's beyond your capabilities, like, because,
yep,
you know.
yep, yeah. And that's
But they
all
don't
this sort of
understand that, they don't understand that it takes years and months and weeks of and days and hours of training. So
yeah. So all of that comes in, and I think this is where generally, if people are, how's my camera focusing?
yeah,
Generally, if people are burning your city or your country down. From what I've seen of France, it's all over the place. It's even in Belgium, which has nothing to do with France. If people are burning, it's generally, as you say, yeah, there's a melting pot of factors where disenfranchised, general feelings of unease, and almost uh, if you were looking for a word, I would call it a cultural breakdown, I think, where you have a
yeah,
country that it doesn't know what it is anymore. What does it mean to be French? What does it mean? I mean, people have been saying this about the UK. You know, England's not England anymore. France is not France anymore. You know, you used to go on a holiday back in the 80s, you know, or the 70s. You know, you could go to France and you could experience France.
Yep.
Today, you go there and it looks like America. You know, there are people, like black people everywhere, and they're burning
Yep.
everything down.
You've got McDonald's in France. I mean,
Yeah, yeah. You
just,
sort of get this sort of homogenous global culture, and it's
and some of it's not
losing.
bad. I mean, it's nice to have something familiar in a foreign country too. But I mean, like, I agree that, like, I mean, this is partly the problem with globalization, is that you just end up making everything the same everywhere. And what makes the world great is distinction, you know,
Yeah,
diversity,
and the interesting thing is, I
which
think
the people who are promoting diversity are the ones who are not promoting, who are not really actually wanting
becomes
diversity.
undiverse. Yeah, we all become the same color brown, and yes, and it's not really diverse, any is it? We're just kind of a mix. We all speak the one
Yeah.
language, and have the same color, which may well be a future outcome of our species at one point. You know,
No,
um,
it's like,
but no,
I don't know if you've heard about the story of the Tower of Babel, but this idea of globalization goes back to the Tower of Babel, and like, yeah, I forget how the story, but
didn't God break the tower and scatter there and
yeah, exactly, because
yeah.
the idea was, go forth and like, what was it? I think somewhere it says in the Bible, go forth and procreate and divide and change. Like, it's not in our species to be the same. Yeah, we all want to be distinct somehow. So it's not.
Well, actually,
It's actually unnatural to want to be exactly the same.
we
So
all want to be unique. We all want
yeah,
to be an individual. That's where I think this whole pronoun stuff. There are 157,000 genders because, well, you're using that pronoun, so I want to be a special. I'm not a special, unique snowflower anymore, so I need to have my own special little unique snowflower name. And the interesting thing on that is, I think part of that is, I think there is a human need, or maybe there's a certain proportion of the population which will always rebel against whatever the mainstream culture
yeah,
is. You'll
I
have
agree with
a
that.
portion of the culture that is just going to be, fuck that, we're going to do the exact opposite. And I think when you go through, say, the quintessential example is to pick 1950s anywhere, or the 1950s era, end of World War II, where people wore top hat, ma'am, and good evening, sir,
Yeah,
and all that sort of stuff. Very polite society,
yeah.
to where we are today, where who wears a hat anymore? I mean, I wear a hat
Yeah.
out here, but that's because of the heat and the sun. That's nothing to do with culture or whatnot. But the interesting thing is, once you get a society where, and I think it's starting to happen. This is why I say this, because I think it's starting to happen, particularly in America.
Yeah.
There was a case the other week where there was a pride thing at a school, and a bunch of kids said, we don't want to participate, and they came where and singing the national anthem and USA, USA, or something like that. They were rebelling against the diversity stuff. And I think, yeah, how do you rebel? Like, any generation has a certain proportion that's rebelling, right? That's always in sort of
Yeah.
rebellion. How do you rebel against a diverse, woke society? You become ultra conservative. And I think what's going to happen is we're
Yeah.
going to start seeing a blowback
Yeah.
towards we're going to start seeing ultra conservatism, like people dressing proper, pushing monogamy, and monogamy in the true sense. I mean, I love I think it was a comedian who did a TED talk once. He said monogamy used to mean, like, today monogamy means I sleep with one person at a time. That's not what monogamy meant. Monogamy meant
You're
monogamy,
married
right?
for life to one person that you love,
You never had sex until you got married to
or
one
that too.
person. You
Yeah.
only had
Yeah.
sex with that one person. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's monogamy. Yeah, so we've sort of changed, corrupted these sort of words to things, and sort of become a
Not
more,
necessarily. Some people just aren't even aware of, like, well, they become corrupt
yeah,
because people don't understand the actual meaning of the word. That's the problem. Because we don't
yeah,
teach anything anymore.
yes,
We
yes, no,
don't teach
no,
the meaning of words anymore. So
no. Well, what are words when we can talk about feelings?
yeah,
How
exactly.
words make you feel. I mean, that's the joke that's going around Facebook about teaching in the 1950s. The farmer has 500 yards of crop, and however many, and how much does he sell them for? And then fast forward it goes, so it just generates down into he sell how much profit does he make, and it's like how he sell, and then the third one is a
Yeah.
farmer has wheat, he sells it for $80 profit, how much profit did he make? And then the current one that's been updated is a farmer has wheat, tell me about your feelings.
We can thank
That's
Michel Foucault for that, and all the fucking relativists that came out in the 1950s and 60s, who were, moral relativists. And We should cover relativism because that's a really interesting subject. Because it basically just says that everything it depends on how you see things, and I'm so sick of people saying that. Everything just depends on your perspective. If you change it, no,
There's
some
no
things are
there's
not dependent on your perspective. Some
there's
things
no
are just
objective reality. It's
facts.
about your
Eight one plus
interpretation
one is
of it.
two. Sorry.
And so there's no objective reality.
Yeah,
It's
there's no
all
objective reality. Yeah.
yes.
We'll cover that, but I think just because we're about 2 minutes left now, we'll circle back to
Okay.
France just quickly. But I think my think is
Where do you think it ends?
I think it's going to end in civil unrest, maybe not necessarily civil war, but maybe some type of like sort of indefinite civil unrest where people are getting killed, and we've got now. Look, I think I don't know if you follow Ryan Dawson, but he was saying potentially you could even see like a military junta taking over and kicking out Macron, which I don't know. I mean,
Well, the French generals apparently wrote a letter saying something about coup, and I can't remember the exact words, but something about we will stand against you, or you will be standing against us, or something like that. Some phrasing like that, where it was like, okay, what the fuck? And that was a couple of weeks ago that or maybe it was a few years ago
yeah.
where they wrote this letter.
It's so hard to think that would happen in the West the way it's been, because we haven't really had a military, a government overthrown in the last how many years in the West? I mean, like
yeah, we've been the longest period of
yeah,
peace
but I think it's very possible.
in
If
history,
it's going to happen
Yeah.
somewhere, it'll happen in France because France always has a history of revolution. So probably would happen there.
Maybe a
I
revolution
can
that's
see
going to
it.
start in France. Do
I
you
think
see
it
it
would.
spread? Yeah.
I think it would happen in France. I think that's going to be the starting point for a lot of this anti-globalist stuff too. I think a lot of it too is what's happening in France is also tied in with the World Health the World Economic Forum, and
And all that sort of shit.
yeah, I think they want. I think they want. They want to. I think, like I was saying in the U.S., they want these cities to be torn down so they can build these 15-minute cities because you have to tear them down in order to rebuild them.
It's the Sim
That's
City problem, yes. I built my city and now shit, I want a highway in there. I've got to demolish everything and put a highway through. Yeah.
exactly. So you turn it to shit, and then you can buy it up for cheap, and then fix it in the way you want to fix it. So.
Mm.
All right, we'll leave it there because I'm not sure how much we'll listen minutes. So we can cover this next week as well.
That's
We'll
enough talking shit for today.
Yes,
Yeah, we'll see what happens. We'll see if France is still standing next week.
All right, man. We'll do. Take care, man.
All right, Constantine, you too.